Good evening, everybody. The West Hollywood City Council acknowledges that the land in which we gather, and that is currently known as the City of West Hollywood, is the occupied, unceded, seized territory of the Gabrieleño Tongva and Gabrieleño Kizh peoples. I'll now call the meeting to order. It is Thursday, October 16th, 2025, 6:30 p.m. This is a meeting of the West Hollywood Planning Commission. At this time, I'll invite anyone who is able to please stand and follow me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Tonight is an exciting night. We have a new planning commissioner. Before we do anything else, we'll have to have our city clerk, Melissa Crowder, come administer the oath of office to our new planning commissioner, Mark Edwards.
Ready?
I'm ready.
Raise your right hand, please. I, Mark R. Edwards,
I, Mark R. Edwards,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that while serving in the office
while serving in the office
as a member of the Planning Commission
as a member of the Planning Commission
of the City of West Hollywood,
of the City of West Hollywood,
that I will support and defend
I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California.
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and to the Constitution of the State of California.
that I take this obligation freely
I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of
evasion,
evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully
that I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties upon which I'm about to enter.
and discharge the duties of what I'm about to enter.
Congratulations.
All right.
Congratulations, Commissioner Edwards. Mr. Gillig, could we have a roll call, please?
Good evening, Commission. Commissioner Solomon. Here. Commissioner Hoopengarner.
Present.
Commissioner Harris.
Here.
Commissioner Edwards.
Here.
Commissioner Carvalero.
Here.
Vice Chair Jones.
Here.
Chair Gregoire.
Here.
And we have a full 7-member quorum.
Thank you so much. Approval of the agenda. I would note that item 11C is a request by staff to continue the item until November 20th, 2025. In approving the agenda, that matter will be so continued. Are there any changes to the agenda?
I'll move.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Could we have a vote, please?
And the motion passes unanimously, approving the agenda for Thursday, October 16th, 2025 as presented.
We have 2 sets of minutes to approve. The first is for September 4th, 2025. I've noted that the land acknowledgement on the draft minutes should be changed. It should say the West Hollywood City Council acknowledges and not the West Hollywood Planning Commission. Does anyone else have any other changes to these sets of minutes? Hearing none, is there a motion?
I'll motion.
I'll second.
I'm sorry, was that Commissioner? Thank you. And the motion passes, noting 6 ayes and 1 abstention by Commissioner Edwards, approving the minutes for September 4th, 2025, as amended in the land acknowledgement template.
The next set of minutes are September 18th, 2025. I'll say I have the same change involving the land acknowledgement. It should say the West Hollywood City Council. Does anyone else have any other changes?
I'll motion.
We have a motion.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second.
And the motion passes with 5 ayes, 2 abstentions, 1 by Commissioner Edwards and the other by Commissioner Solomon, approving the minutes for September 18th, 2025, as amended to the land acknowledgement template going forward.
Next item is public comment. This time, limited to a maximum of 20 minutes, has been set aside for the public to address the Planning Commission on any item that is not set for public hearing or any item that is not on tonight's agenda. In accordance with the Brown Act, public comment related to business not appearing on the agenda cannot be acted upon or discussed by the Commission during the meeting, but may be referred to staff for report on a future agenda, ordered, received, and filed, or referred to the proper department for administrative resolution. Staff requests that all persons wishing to address the Commission please fill out a speaker slip and give it to the Commission Secretary prior to speaking. The Commission requests that when you begin speaking, please state your name and the name of the city where you reside. Individuals may address the Commission up to 3 minutes each unless the Commission determines a different time. Mr. Gillig, do we have any public speakers?
Chair, we have no public speakers on Zoom. We do have a few here in council chambers. Our first public speaker will be Chad Kroger. He would be followed by JT Parr, then Ed Holman.
What up, Council? My name is Chad Kroger. So today we began on a journey to help a young man, Terry, with compulsive gooning. But we realized quickly that Terry wasn't the one who needed help. Instead, it was JT. So we went on a journey to later his addiction. We went on a hot wing sesh at Buffalo Wild Wings. We did a coaching with Nick Nayersina. We punched a metaphorical dink. And then we got a sesh with Wicked Witch and a beautiful spiritual session as well. A lot of sessions. And yeah, to anyone out there who has a boy struggling, no judgment, just have his back. So, JT, the floor is yours.
We live in West Hollywood. What up, Council? My name is JT Parr, and I just erased my entire speech. But I don't need it because I can speak from the heart on this. I have struggled with gooning my entire life. I'm an OG who's put in serious work, and I should feel more shame over this. But I've always been buttressed by the love of my dog, Chad. I think the crux of this problem is loneliness, and I've never had to feel that because he's always kept me in connection. But there's a lot of suffering dudes out there who are gooning day and night who don't have that, and I want them to know I have their back. I also want to give a big shout out to California for passing meaningful legislation that will protect youngsters from emerging new technologies that could expose their minds to harmful pornography. That was huge. What up, Assembly Bill 621? Now let me get back to my message to all the bros out there who are struggling. This is a message. I am with you, and we are ready to leave gooning behind. The snow glows white on the mountain tonight, not a footprint to be seen. A kingdom of isolation, and it looks like I'm the queen. The wind is howling like the swirling storm inside. couldn't keep it in. Heaven knows I've tried. Don't let them in, don't let them see. Be the good girl you always have to be. Conceal, don't feel, don't let them know. Well, now they know. Go, let it go. Can't hold it back anymore. Let it go, let it go. Turn away and slam the door. I don't care what they're going to say. Let the storm rage on. The cold never bothered me anyway. Stay strong, everybody. Thank you guys so much.
And our last speaker here in chambers will be Ed Holman.
Good evening, Ed Holman, West Hollywood, 29 years on Flores Street. I support the arts, but I must oppose the specific design that the staff is going to present on Monday night at City Council meeting. It trades the convenience of commercial traffic flow on Santa Monica Boulevard for the erosion of strict safety and quality of life on our block. Flores isn't wide like Crescent Heights or Fairfax. It's a narrow residential street. Have you been to the corner of Santa Monica and Flores lately? It's painted red. Have you seen what happens when a delivery truck parks in that red? Traffic is unable to get by, especially when the southbound traffic is at the light. Again, the street is too narrow, there's no room. Cars will be backed up onto Santa Monica Boulevard until the Flores-facing light turns green. God forbid someone is trying to enter the parking lot of the strip mall across the street. The plan to place equipment drop-off, loading, unloading zones, and a rideshare drop-off on Flores Street is a recipe for chaos. This is a direct safety threat to our elderly and less mobile residents. The use of Flores Street will inevitably degrade our quality of life. Residents that are already affected by late-night restaurant noise will now be subjected to late-night theater noise and added vehicles noise from the outdoor reception area and the continuous activity associated with patron arrivals and departures. Furthermore, the plan intensifies our already severe residential parking crisis by shifting access to Flores. The city inadvertently encourages theater employees and visitors to seek street parking on Flores, effectively eliminating the few available spaces for the street's residents. Our stretch of Flores between Santa Monica and Fountain is being Eiffel Towered thanks to this new plan and the Fountain Street project. We urge the Commission to keep the original plan. The loading and access elements must and should be managed for the more appropriate commercial frontage along Santa Monica Boulevard, even if it requires a dedicated timed curb lane. Alternatively, the alley at the rear of the theater was already deemed suitable for theater logistics. Do not sacrifice safety and peace of the residential street for a project that should enhance, not endanger our community. You must re-engage with the community on this. This affects us more now than it did before by moving the theater to the corner of Flores and Santa Monica. An informed community is an engaged community. Thank you.
And Chair, that was our last public speaker for general public comments.
Great, thank you. Thank you everyone for your public comments. Director's report. Director Marisic.
Good evening, Chair Gregoire, Vice Chair Jones, and Commissioners. Nick Marisic, Director of Community Development. I want to start by welcoming back Mark Edwards, Commissioner Edwards. Congratulations on your appointment, and we look forward to working with you and the rest of the commissioners on the important business that comes before this body. Next, I wanted to address something that I know has been on a lot of people's minds, which has been the recent passage and signing of significant new state legislation. As many of you know, last Friday, the governor signed dozens of housing-related bills, including Senate Bill 79, or SB 79. So I wanted to let everyone know we're currently looking into the many facets of SB 79 and assessing possible implications of the law on the city of West Hollywood. For those who may not be aware, just a very brief and generalized summary, the bill takes effect July 1st of 2026. It requires that cities allow new housing development to be built to certain specified heights and densities.
in residential or commercial zones if they are within a given radius, typically a quarter mile to half mile, around existing or planned rail or bus rapid transit stations. The bill also contains provisions for cities to optionally adopt alternative plans, which are subject to a number of parameters set by the state. As there are currently no existing rail or bus rapid transit stops located in the city, whether or how particular neighborhoods will be affected by this new state law may ultimately depend on the routing that Metro selects as the preferred alignment for the K-Line Northern Extension Rail project. And while we don't know yet what that will look like, we will certainly update the community and the City Council when we know more. I also want to thank community members who came out to participate in our recent workshops for the Zoning Improvement Program for Housing, also known as ZIP. I believe we had well over 100 people participate across the 2 meeting dates, and staff will continue working to advance this important program as part of our housing element implementation. We anticipate having a ZIP item come to the Planning Commission for discussion early next year. Also would like to update you on 2 items from the recent City Council meeting on October 6th. First, the Council approved the most recent zone text amendment for our accessory dwelling unit regulations, which had been recommended for approval by this body, and there were no changes made to the ordinance as part of the Council's action. Second, the City Council continued their discussion of noticing requirements for projects requesting development agreements. Staff presented additional information that had been requested by the Council, and the Council voted to maintain the current 500-foot radius for mailing of public notices for these types of applications. And finally, while it's not a City of West Hollywood project, I did want to mention an upcoming online community meeting that Metro is hosting on November 12th at 6 p.m. on Zoom. The meeting is regarding peak hour bus lane proposals for Sunset Boulevard, beginning just outside of the City of West Hollywood boundary at Havenhurst Drive. And more information and a registration link to the community meeting can be found on the city's website at weho.org/calendar. And again, the date is November 12th. And that concludes my comments for this evening. Happy to answer any questions. Thanks.
Any questions for the director? Commissioner Solomon?
I'm sure you've probably given a lot of thought to this, but given the fact that at least the rumor of what I hear is that the Metro Board will select a PLA for the NKE at the end of this year or the beginning of next year. That also kind of butts up right among our ZIP discussions as it comes here or goes to council. Is there any thought about our current calendar on our ZIP discussions being affected, delayed until we do have a PLA from Metro?
So those are certainly things that we're looking at right now as we're trying to understand, again, what the bill's impacts could be here in West Hollywood and how those align with ZIP and other initiatives that we have underway. So nothing to report on that front at this time, but certainly something we're looking into.
Great. Any other questions for the director? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We don't have anything on our consent calendar tonight, and we also don't have any public hearings subject to the Housing Accountability Act. We do, however, have 2 public hearings. They're both general plan consistency determinations. The first one is for property located at 7710 Santa Monica Boulevard. Before we have a staff report, are there any commissioner disclosures with respect to this item? Great, hearing none. Could we have a staff report?
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Allison Bartle. I'm in the city manager's department. I'm the project development administrator. I'm just trying to pull up there we go, PowerPoint. All right, the first item before you tonight is 7710 Santa Monica Boulevard. Just to outline what we're doing tonight, so before any property is acquired by the city, the Planning Commission must determine that the location, purpose, and extent of the acquisition is consistent and conforms with the general plan, so that's Government Code 65402. 7710 Santa Monica, the long-term use has not been determined, but the acquisition creates an opportunity to consolidate the site as part of a potentially larger development area. So more about the site, it's currently Homes and Gardens Studio. Above or on your screens is a recent photo. This site is along Santa Monica Boulevard, just adjacent, not immediately adjacent to an existing city-owned parking lot the city has at 7718 Santa Monica. It's a 3,125 square foot site. It's currently improved with a 1,152 square foot commercial building containing the landscape design firm Homes and Gardens Studio. It's zone CC1, and it's near the city-owned parking lot at 7718. Again, the future use is to be determined. On August 4th, the City Council authorized the purchase of the property, and as part of the purchase agreement prior to the close of escrow, we've been conducting due diligence, and that includes coming to Planning Commission and reviewing the project's general plan consistency. We find it consistent in several areas. The first one, LU1, maintain an urban form and land use pattern that enhances quality of life and meets the community's vision for the future. LU2, maintain a balanced mix and distribution of land uses that encourages strategic development opportunities and mobility choices within the city. ED3, provide for continued economic growth through development and public improvements. G2, maintain transparency and integrity in the West Hollywood decision-making process. And then the last two, OSP9, upgrade existing buildings infrastructure, and IRC11, provide high-quality, safe, well-maintained, and sustainable facilities for city operations. This acquisition is categorically exempt in 3 areas. The first one, 15378, the purchase of the property is not subject to CEQA because it does not constitute a project. Secondly, even if it did constitute a project, the action would be exempt from CEQA, section 15061B3, because it can be seen with certainty that there is no possibility that the approval of the purchase may have a significant effect on the environment. And furthermore, no exceptions to the exemption pursuant to section 15300.2 apply because the purchase will only change ownership of the property. Lastly, future use of the site would be subject to CEQA review, applicability with development standards, and a public review process. So that would be a separate hearing, a separate process. Tonight is just about the acquisition. With that, the recommendation, staff finds the proposed acquisition at 7710 consistent and in conformance with the general plan, exempt from CEQA, and recommends the Planning Commission adopt the draft resolution. I'm available for questions.
Great. Before we go to public comment, do the commissioners have any questions of staff? Great. Let's go to public comment.
Thank you. We have one public comment here in chambers. Delilah Dabashi. You'll have 3 minutes.
Delilah Dabashi, Northridge. I have serious concerns about
There you go. Thank you. There you go.
I have serious concerns about the harassment of the 76-year-old property owner adjacent to 7710 Santa Monica that is being perpetrated on behalf of the city of West Hollywood, specifically the real estate agent currently engaged by the city, Chris Bondbright. The 76 property owner has been harassed, threatened, and lied to. She was lied to that the property was already purchased by the city. She was threatened with eminent domain, which we know is rare and requires specific circumstances. When she indicated that she refused to sell, she was still harassed, still threatened. I'm concerned about the continued harassment she will have to endure if the property purchase is finalized. I'm concerned about Brian League's and Chris Bondbright's potential self-dealing in this matter. I'm mostly concerned with the harassment that a 76-year-old West Hollywood resident, property owner, and taxpayer has had to endure. I'm sure that the other residents of West Hollywood will feel the same, and I'm sure that the media will feel the same. I'm hopeful that the committee will reconsider the purchase of this property, considering that the current landlord or property owner refuses to sell. Purchasing this property, knowing that the adjacent properties does not want to sell, and without having a specific proposed plan of action does not make any sense. We would hope that you would reconsider. And should any continued harassment ensue with this specific property owner, I would assume that there would be action taken by her. She is very stressed. Again, 76-year-old woman refusing to sell, getting harassed on behalf of the city of West Hollywood. It is not acceptable. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. That is our last public speaker for this item, Chair.
Great, I'll close the public comment section of this hearing. Before we go to commissioner discussion and a motion, are there any other questions for staff? Hearing none. Commissioner discussion. Who would like to begin? Commissioner Hoopengarner.
I would just like to thank the speaker for their comments. It seems to be concerning, but it would be appropriate to address that to City Council and to City Attorney and City Manager. Unfortunately, this body is tasked with looking at this purchase as to whether or not it is consistent with the general plan, and that's the sole extent of our purview. So those would be my comments on the subject.
Great. Who else would like to speak? Okay. Is there somebody who would like to make a motion?
Can I just make one comment, actually, quickly? I just want to thank Delilah for coming out tonight to make us aware of this. Per Commissioner Hoopengarner's comment, I would encourage you to be in touch with staff, with city attorney, and with city council. Please come to the meeting. I know it's time out of your night. But again, really do appreciate you coming and taking time out of your evening to be here this evening. I don't have any comments on the proposed acquisition itself, only that I certainly hope that no one would be harassed in the process of us acquiring property. Those are my comments.
Very well said. Anybody else? Is there a motion? Commissioner Edwards has moved the staff's recommendation. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Great, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Shall we go to a vote?
And the motion passes unanimously with 7 ayes, approving draft resolution number 251623. This item is non-appealable. This is the final stop for this resolution.
Great, thank you. The next general plan consistency determination item we have on our agenda is 8327 Santa Monica Boulevard. Before we go to a staff report, are there any commissioner disclosures? Hearing and seeing none, could we have a staff report?
Good evening again. Very similar on this item. Again, general plan consistency finding is necessary before we can move forward with the purchase. Again, this provides the city an opportunity for strategic redevelopment, and I'll specifically discuss a little bit about the Playhouse and some of the interconnected goals. So this site, familiar across the street from City Hall, it's formerly Basics. It shut down in March of 2020 due to COVID. It is immediately contiguous to other city-owned property at 8301 to 8325 Santa Monica Boulevard on the north side, along Flores and between Flores and Sweetser. It's a 5,047 square foot site. It's improved with a now vacant 4,500 square foot commercial restaurant that was formerly Basics, Zone CC2. Again, future development is to be determined, but there is discussion on October 20th at City Council about a possible relocation of the City Playhouse from its existing location at 8325, potentially to this site. But tonight, we're just talking about the acquisition. Here we go. August 4th, the council authorized the city to enter into a ground lease agreement with the option to purchase. Prior to closing escrow, we're here tonight. This is a 10-year ground lease with an opportunity to purchase at the end, exclusive opportunity to purchase at the end of year 10. During the 10-year lease, we are allowed full control of the property. We may demolish the existing structures, develop, repair, restore, or replace the existing improvements on the property. And this is consistent in the following areas. LU1, maintain an urban form and land use pattern that enhances quality of life and meets the community's vision for its future. LU2, maintain a balanced mix and distribution of land uses that encourages strategic development opportunities and mobility choices within the city. G2, maintain transparency and integrity in West Hollywood decision-making processes. OSP 9, upgrade existing buildings and infrastructure. IRC 11, provide high-quality, safe, well-maintained, and sustainable facilities for city operations. Again, the acquisition is, the lease and the acquisition in itself does not constitute a project, and so pursuant to CEQA 15378, it's exempt. Alternatively, if it was a project, the action would be exempt under 15061B3 because it can be seen with certainty there is no possible the approval of the lease may have a significant effect on the environment. And furthermore, it's exempt under 15300.2 because the lease will only change the possessory interest of the properties to grant the leasehold interest and not change the existing structure's uses. And then lastly, I'll just mention again, October 20th, next Monday, City Council and the Urban Architecture Studio will be discussing possible relocation, but and based on that direction, we will have a path to entitlement and CEQA, but tonight it's again just the general plan consistency finding.
Thank you, Ms. Bartle. Before we go to public comment, are there any questions for staff? Hearing and seeing none, do we have any public comment?
Chair, we have one public speaker for this item. Ed Holman, you will have 3 minutes.
Good evening once again. Ed Holman, 29-year resident on Flores. I am opposed to leasing this property to the city, or the city's purchasing it. In section 4 of the resolution, it states that notices were mailed to surrounding property owners and occupants within a 500 radius and the subject property to the neighborhood watch groups on October 2nd. I live 290 feet from the property. I've not received any notification from this other than seeing the notification on the front of Basics. Here's my email from October 2nd, and there are emails from the city, but none of it mentions what's on the thing tonight. I also am in the neighborhood watch block captain for the street. I've not received any notification about this. Only notice I saw was the sign on the front of Basics that's on the street there. Everywhere in here, it talks about Santa Monica Boulevard, Santa Monica Boulevard, Santa Monica Boulevard. Nothing is, because the city is planning to move the theater to the corner, there's nothing mentioned about how it's going to affect Flores Street. This will affect Flores, the plan that they want to do. And as a resident on Flores, like I said, for 29 years, I've seen the traffic flow at the corner of there. It's currently red on Flores, at the corner of Santa Monica and Flores. And when delivery vehicles are making deliveries to Merrick's and Zarape and all this stuff in the strip mall across the street, traffic is blocked there. No one can go north on Flores if there's southbound traffic at the light until the light turns green and that traffic can move. You're creating chaos by allowing this lease to go through, and then the plan, automatically there's a plan in there to move the theater to the new location, a proposal. I think it's B or whatever it is. And there's been public input. The only input on this is either here tonight, which none of my neighbors are here because none of us received notice on this. And then the only other opportunity for public comment is the city council meeting to talk about this. That's it. There's been no other neighborhood input other than the initial design of where the current proposal is, where it's supposed to be now. Nothing has been said to anybody, to anyone on the street about the new location where they're proposing it move to. And so for those reasons, I'm objecting to the lease going through because no one's talking to the neighbors about the proposal moving it to the corner. I oppose this 100%. The only notice I've gotten in the mail recently is from the Fountain project. This is the last card I got to my address about any projects on the street. And I'm further from Fountain than I am from Santa Monica. I'm 290 feet from the Santa Monica and Flores, the corner there. I'm 2 doors up from Merrick's. So I had not received any notice on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. That is our last public speaker on this item for public comment.
Thank you for your public comment. Before we go to, I will close the public comment section of this hearing. Before we go to commissioner discussion and a possible motion, are there any other questions for staff?
Yes, I have a question for staff.
Commissioner Harris.
My question, I assume the city uses a contractor to do their public mailings, their public noticing, and that contractor has to sign a perjury statement stating that to the best of their knowledge, they've contacted everyone within the applicable radius around the site.
That's my understanding, just leaning on the planning staff. Yes?
Okay. And did the city complete that for this project? And was there a perjury statement that was signed and certified with a list of all the mailing addresses that received the notification for this meeting?
Yeah, we followed the notices for this project just like any other public hearing. So it was a routine procedure for us.
Thank you.
Any other questions of staff? Hearing none, we'll go into commissioner discussion.
So just to note, we can't take comment or feedback from the audience when the public comment period is closed, but there was a request just to restate what was articulated so it's clear in the microphone.
Please do.
I was just stating that we followed a routine procedure for this public hearing, just like any other ones, of publishing the notice and mailing it out to the radius of where the property is located. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other questions? Commissioner Hoopengarner.
Yes, and was it published in the Beverly Press and the other media that are normally the locations for notice publications?
Yeah, it was noticed as required by law.
Okay. I'm not convinced. I don't believe I got mine, so that's one of the reasons I'm asking. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, hearing none, let's go to commissioner discussion. Who would like to begin? Commissioner Solomon?
I mean, I'll just echo the same sentiment that was said earlier. These general plan consistency items are more or less a pro forma sort of thing that we have to do on the Planning Commission to determine whether or not the acquisition of any property is consistent with the general plan. And it's hard to imagine an instance where the acquisition of real property by the city would not be consistent with the general plan, given how broadly a general plan is written and given that that is kind of the ordinary course of business for a city to do. Specific objections to the use of the site could be valid objections. It's just we can't do anything about it here as far as it relates to a future use of the site. We're just here to say whether or not this acquisition aligns with the general plan.
Well said, Commissioner Solomon. Commissioner Edwards.
And just to dovetail on that, is that whenever the city decides to do something with that piece of property, it will have to go through this whole process of notification, public hearings, something will be put out for the public to comment. So the process is covered for future use.
Anybody else? Hearing none, is there a motion?
Make a motion?
Please do.
I make a motion to approve the staff report as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, let's go to the vote.
And the motion passes unanimously with 7 ayes. This is approving resolution number PC 25-1622 for the property located at 8327 Santa Monica Boulevard. This item is also non-appealable, so this is the final stop for this resolution.
Great, thank you so much. Item 11C, as a reminder, was a zone text amendment. state parking bill implementation, and by approving the agenda this evening, we have continued that matter to at least November 20th, 2025. We have new business this evening, inclusionary housing ordinance update. We will be receiving an overview of proposed updates to the city's inclusionary housing ordinance, a key implementation program of the city's 6th cycle housing element. My understanding from discussions with staff that they're not looking for any sort of motion or resolution or consensus by the commission this evening, that they will be making a presentation to us, and they'll be asking us for comments and feedback that they can pass on to the City Council. With that, are there any disclosures on this item?
I'm sorry, I need some clarification here. This is proposing updates to the zoning ordinance, correct? And so we're not going to be voting on that at all?
This item is merely an update on a policy recommendation to improve the inclusionary housing ordinance, but it's not legislative action. There's no resolution. We're just getting feedback from the commission and summarizing that for City Council for their ultimate policy decision.
Okay, thank you.
We'll come back with the zone text amendment afterwards.
Great. Any disclosures? Okay, could we have Commissioner Edwards?
Yes, just for the purpose of clarity and transparency, is that I am involved with the Abundant Housing LA. They did submit a letter, which I was not aware of. My only role with Abundant Housing is I'm on the part of it that does endorsements of campaigns outside of the city of West Hollywood. So I have no role with the C4 or with the C3.
Thank you. Any other disclosures?
I'll make the same disclosure as Commissioner Edwards. I'm also on the endorsement committee, but no active role on the C3 or C4.
Great, thank you. Anything else? Okay. Hearing none, could we have a staff report, please?
Good evening, Chair, Vice Chair, and Commissioners. My name is Michelle Montenegro, an Associate Planner with the Long Range Planning Division of the Community Development Department. I'm joined by our Manager, Francisco Contreras, our Assistant Director, Jenna Alkire, and of course, our Director, Nick Marisech. So I'll be going through a presentation providing background and context to the inclusionary housing ordinance, the purpose of the study that was initiated and contracted out with the housing workshop this past year, and the findings and results for staff's recommendation to move forward to City Council. And once again, we are looking for feedback from the Commission and no motion or vote. So the inclusionary housing ordinance, which I'll refer to as the IHO through the presentation, is the city's mechanism to provide income-restricted affordable housing units with private development. It is regulated by our zoning ordinance, specifically West Hollywood Municipal Code Section 1922-030, and it was identified as a point of modernization by the Housing Element Program number 14. You may all have seen this multiple times, but just to reiterate, the city has only accomplished about 6% of its lower income units of RHNA, 1% of moderate, and about 24% of above moderate, so the greatest need is done with affordable units. Throughout our cycle thus far, there's been 65 inclusionary units being produced. This does not include 100% affordable housing projects that are produced through LIHTC or other sources of funding. So the study itself originated from the 6th cycle housing element that was adopted and certified in 2023 by the City Council and HCD. In the Housing Element Program 14 was a number of objectives that ultimately consolidated and created this feasibility study. One was to align with state law. This was mostly in response to guidance provided by HCD with the pattern of affordability mix that the city previously required and practiced, and I'll talk about a little bit later. second was maintaining the IHO 20% set aside that currently existed and applies today for larger projects of 11 units or more, continuing to serve lowest income units throughout the city, and of course, achieving financial feasibility. So as we talk about the methodology for this study, there's two primary core pillars. One is aligning the cities and states' HCD schedules, and two is optimizing affordability mix so we're reaching our RENA goals and overall housing goals. As a quick overview, the IHO is a mandatory program within the city that applies to any projects of 2+ units. Its application is different for small projects and large projects. Today, a small project is required to build one affordable unit or pay an in-lieu fee per the in-lieu fee schedule that is annually updated through a fee resolution through the City Council. Or through large projects of 11 or more units, they're required to build 20% affordable per our local Schedule A or Schedule B. State density bonus law is a voluntary program. It applies to 5+ units. It allows certain density bonus to be allocated to projects if they meet an affordability mix on a sliding scale. So the first issue that was identified in the housing element and something that has been identified in the study is the need to realign the local Schedule A and Schedule B with our state HCD schedules. The local schedules for the city of West Hollywood ultimately originated from the US Census data and has been annually adjusted per Consumer Price Index. The HCD schedule's methodology relies on an area median income, otherwise known as AMI, and there are factors adjusted for the LA region. These two schedules have diverged over time since the beginning of the inclusionary housing ordinance, which can be seen on the right graph. The West Hollywood schedules are in green and the HCD are in yellow, showcasing the difference in income schedules as they currently exist today. So as we move forward to think about policy options for 11+ rental units, our consultant did a methodology that looked at 3 different buckets of options, I would describe them as. So the baseline is the first one. This is merely changing the labels and correcting the correct income category with the correct income category name under HCD and state limits. So that would equal about 15% ELI and 5% VLI. No other changes are happening beyond that. The second bucket of options was option A through D. All of these assumed a 20% set aside. Option A and B specifically offered flexibility through providing a 5% in lieu fee. And you can see the second to the bottom row that max density bonus is assigned per that affordability mix. Option E is the only option that we increased or studied and increased in inclusionary housing ordinance. Ultimately, it would require 20% set aside and a 5% in lieu fee. Staff ultimately is proposing option D, specifically because it provides the widest range of affordability among all the options presented. However, in order for option D to achieve financial feasible projects under different prototypes, we would require a 20% local density bonus to mirror state density bonus because a low income unit 5% requirement exists. The recommendation for small projects is a little bit different. Today, 1 unit is required for the small projects, or they can pay an in lieu fee. We've now separated the requirement for small projects into 2 buckets. The first is 2 to 4 units. These are not state density eligible projects because they do not reach the minimum of 5 units, and they can be paid through an in lieu fee. The second bucket of 5 to 10 units are state density bonus eligible. So we are requiring a must-build requirement of 15% set aside. Any fractional obligation beyond that would pay in the in lieu fee that was referenced earlier for the fee schedule that's annually adopted by the city. The thinking behind this is that the outcome would produce more affordable units on site. A previous study on the inclusionary housing ordinance also suggested a 15% set aside, which was a goal and objective of the housing element. Some other policies as part of this update, state density bonus law does identify specialized housing types that are not necessarily defined or clarified for the city's IHO. So this proposal would recommend applying IHO to senior housing, student housing, and share housing by defining these terms in the zoning code and ensuring that these standards exist. Secondly, it would recommend adhering to state density bonus law for foster youth, veterans, and homeless housing. Because these housing types are traditionally 100% affordable, the need for an application of IHO does not exist. The IHO in mixed-use projects was a directive that was brought into the City Council by 2020 that we've decided to analyze under this umbrella of update because it is so intrinsically tied. So staff is proposing no recommendation to the change of inclusionary from units to floor area, which was the proposal. This would only apply to mixed-use projects in commercial zones. Ultimately, it was a mechanism to combat luxury units being developed in the commercial corridors. However, under the zoning improvement program, we are attempting to modify or rectify this issue through calibrating zoning density with building envelope along the commercial corridors. It also, if we change this rule of measurement for the IHO, may cause confusion among developers and staff alike because there is no inclusionary ordinance today that relies on a floor area formula. And also we track our arena in units. So this is an easy way to be transparent with the public about how many affordable units are being produced. The implications of the IHO update is that it would not apply to existing units that are under Schedule A and Schedule B. Those will continue to pay the rent that they have been. It does apply to new development once it's been deemed complete or entitled. Additionally, the shift from Schedule A and Schedule B to the state schedules may impact households on the wait list. These households will continue to qualify on the existing wait list. However, the pool of qualifying households may increase for the wait list, therefore reducing the pool of units that may be available because of the matching of the labels for income categories. Secondly, there is also a chance that displaced households under redevelopment may also be impacted. Even though they still get first right of refusal under demolition protections, they would be subject to the new schedules upon return. So we're covering an overview of the timeline. The first portion of this project is the policy recommendation, which we're currently in. We went to Rent Stabilization Commission on September 25th. We're here today in Planning Commission for feedback. We'll be taking the policy to City Council November 3rd for their policy decision. Afterwards, we'll return to Planning Commission with the legislative changes through an ordinance or through resolution recommending an ordinance for a zone text amendment for ultimate adoption in City Council estimated for Q2 2026. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may all have. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Ms. Montenegro. Hey, before we get to Commissioner questions and feedback, I think it probably makes sense to go to public comment. Do we have any public comment?
Chair, there is no public comment for this item.
Great, thank you. I will close the public comment section of this hearing. Let's go to Commissioner questions. Who would like to begin?
Yeah, I had one question, and it was about the breakdown for option D. It's for rental units. It's a total of a 20% set aside, broken down as 5% ELI, 10% VLI, and 5% LI. And I understand that there's a local program to support the 5% LI that would grant its own density bonus to projects that include that. That 5% ELI, I suppose my question is, when I look at the city's RENA allocation, it doesn't designate what portion of the very low income units are ELI. And so I think in order to make a decision about whether or not how that 20% should be broken down and whether it should be mandatory to include ELI units, we should understand how that helps the city meet its RENA goals better than say other options like option C, which provide the very low income units but not any ELI. So my question is, what portion of the city's RENA allocation under VLI is ELI as separated out from VLI?
I don't have that number, but I can go ahead and go back and find out what it is. I will say that this current cycle of housing element doesn't require the reporting of ELI, which is why we don't include it as its own separate category. The 7th cycle housing element will. So that's part of the reason we are not receiving credit for ELI, and it's categorized together. But I can return with that answer, follow up.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner Hoopengarner.
Can you explain the assumptions that drive the different ROC on the residential versus the commercial? Because there seems to be a dramatic difference between the return being projected on residential properties versus commercial for presumably the same amount of construction. So I'm trying to understand what the assumptions were that drove that.
I'm going to ask, we have our consultants, the Housing Workshop and Urban Math on Zoom. They can go ahead and respond to that question.
Okay.
Hi, this is Janet Smithheimer. I'm not on video, but I guess you don't have me anyway. So I think what you're asking is, we had 4 zoning categories that we looked at. 2 were our categories 3 and 4, and 2 were the CC1 and CC2. But we're analyzing just residential across all 4, and you can see all the unit and density assumptions in there. The main reason the return on cost drops in the CC1 and 2 zones is because you have denser projects switching to a different construction type, which costs more per square foot. So when you go from your typical wood frame for a 5-story building that you can build in your R4 zone, for example, to the density you already allow, and this, plus these density bonuses that are allowed by state after they comply with their inclusionary ordinance, when you build to those densities, you're in a different, more expensive construction type. And that causes the return on cost to drop. That's the main reason. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you. WehoTV, I don't know if you're on. That was really loud and the reverb was pretty intense, so I don't know if there's any way we can fix that, or maybe, Janet, when you speak, maybe back away a little bit from the microwave.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm on a very unstable connection and I can't tell that it was loud. I apologize.
Not a problem. We're at the whim of the technology gods. Okay, thank you.
We can work at that on this end.
Okay, thank you. So to follow up on that, what you're saying, if I understood you correctly, is it has nothing to do with the amount of inclusionary being included. It's simply building is more expensive in a mixed-use project, period, regardless of what inclusionary is included. So I guess my question is, why are we making inclusionary decisions based upon information that has nothing to do with additional inclusionary housing?
Okay. It's a good question. I'm trying to think of how to answer that. It's not that it's more expensive because it's mixed use. It's because in those mixed use zones, you have you have an ability to build much more denser housing already. So even if you had no commercial and it was just a housing building in a CC1 or CC2, which is what we analyzed, just housing at 150 units an acre once you achieve your density bonus, that's very dense. In your R3 and R4, it works out to a much lower number. So when you're building 150 units an acre, that gets you to your 8, 9, 10 stories with this density bonus that the state grants. And so you're automatically needing, when you go that high, taking your density bonus to switch from a wood frame to a poured concrete or a reinforced steel, and if you go higher, you need all steel frame. So it's not really about the mixed use, it's not about the commercial in the way we did this analysis. It's just housing at a lower density in the Rs and a higher density allowed by your zoning today in the CC1 and 2.
So if I understand you correctly, if we were to take the same project in an R3 zone and build it on Santa Monica Boulevard in a mixed-use zone, the actual construction cost would be the same.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that's back to my question, when you continue to move this forward, being clear about the impact of inclusionary housing on any of these constraints is being conflated with the actual cost of construction just because of the type of building you're proposing. It has nothing to do with the inclusionary housing. Okay.
And can I make one more comment on that same vein, just quickly? So take an example where you have 50 units an acre that you're allowed and you get a 70%.
I'm sorry, Janet. I just really can't understand you right now.
I'm sorry. Maybe Jessica wants to jump in. She might have a better connection.
Also, maybe just speak a little bit slower, because it's creating an echoey type reverb here that's really difficult to understand. Thank you.
I'm rolling across the floor now. Now I lost my train of thought. You wouldn't ever build the density that R4 allows in a CC1 or CC2. Because this is all structured out of density bonus, and it's percent of your density. So when your density is higher as a base, that same percent gives you more units. Does that make sense?
I understand that, but
yeah.
There's a bit of a conflation of some of the assumptions here that I think is creating a false answer in terms of the actual cost. But let's move on.
Okay.
On the whole concept of different configurations on rental versus sales, help me understand. We often, we get asked to approve a building based upon a rental, and then we come back for a track map. Is that affordability mix locked in regardless? Or is this new proposed modification going to somehow be affected by, subsequent track maps and the mixes that they would have had to have should they have brought forward a condominium project versus a rental project? Does that make sense? In other words, based on what I'm reading, and needless to say, this is very dense and very complicated, and none of us had really a lot of time to consume it, it appears that you're talking about a different configuration for rental projects versus sale projects. And given that often these projects come through to us as rentals, and then presto, they want a track map and become a sale project, all of a sudden, they were approved under configuration A, and now we're looking at potential configuration B, and the affordability mix is different, how does that work?
So we've heard about that process that's been occurring in West Hollywood, but I think this is a question more about implementation of when it's locked in for planning to answer.
Correct. So I can answer a little bit of that question. We do the compliance for affordability mix during the entitlement process of the actual housing development project. So if it was rental, it'll comply with the 5% VLI, 10%, 5% ELI, 10% VLI, 5% low income. That covenant can be updated when it comes again for the subdivision maps. So that would be under the new affordability mixes that are under the rental requirements. So that would be moving up.
I'm sorry, but that is really counterintuitive. Either we're going to have X amount of affordable or we're not. And if we're, shifting it around, based upon some future decision about whether or not to go condo or not.
I think what's important to understand is right now that is really easy for them to go back and forth. They can get approved as rental and come back as condos because it's all the same. But the process may need to change. There might have to be a different way that comes back, if that's even possible. But yeah, it would change how projects can convert from rental to for sale.
Well,
product.
I think that wasn't really clear in here at all, that there would be some consequences that if they, change post facto, what are those consequences? What needs to change in the code?
That's the kind of thing that
addressed up front.
That we would work out once we get the policy direction, is the details of how that works with the processes that we have or doesn't work, or if we need to form new things.
Okay, because I think that, we could, walk in with a project A with, 6 inclusionary units, and then all of a sudden, we're going to go condo. Well, under the condo, we only need 5, and presto change it. We just lost a unit. And how is that helping us comply with our RENA and hello, the whole goal, which is give more affordable, So I think that that needs some work. Okay. Hold on, let me get back in here. In reading your study, you state on page 27, quote, "It should be noted that a 12% ROC, that's the return on cost threshold, to deem feasibility was chosen to be, in quotes, conservative, unquote, from an analytic point of view, because it is fairly generous to developers. It was intentionally selected by the Housing Workshop to reflect some identifiable near-term economic uncertainties, et cetera, et cetera." So you clearly, per your appendix, met with a lot of developers, and they all discussed this, and they said a 12% return on cost is a generous return. Which, speaking as anyone with a retirement portfolio, a 12% return would be glorious, okay? Throughout your matrix, basically with 1 or 2 exceptions, the minimum return is 12%. And you're looking at projects with double and 2.5 times that return. So I'm all for capitalism, but if our goal is to really increase inclusionary housing, why are we creating a matrix where we're saying to developers, sure, go ahead, make a 30% ROC, and don't bother putting in that much affordable housing, because I'm not sure why. So I'm trying to understand why in this matrix, in this analysis, we're looking at you know, what on paper, everybody agrees a 12% return is generous. And we're looking at your matrix, which is not up on the screen, but is in your staff report on pages, I believe, 9 and 10. Those returns are, again, double and 2.5 times that. So please help me understand that rationale and why we would move forward in that scenario.
Would you like me to answer that one, Betty?
Yes, please, Janet. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So if you look at those returns on cost, they do drop for some of these options. And they are higher in ours because as we talked about before, in the R zones. But we have the same view that you do. We wanted to see if we could go to a 25% set aside. That's that last column on the screen. Just know that we did most of our numbers in late fall of 2024, so a while ago, and before the current economic situation with the additional tariffs and some other flattening of rents in some markets. So we wanted to make sure that nothing we're recommending or describing in this study would limit or put a new constraint onto market rate housing production. It's kind of a circular logic here that we need to find the sweet spot that allows allows market rate housing to proceed in a positive, feasible way and not constrain it. And so that's kind of why we landed with the options we have and the outcomes that we show.
And you know, to my way of thinking is that when you start seeing those dichotomies, those gross variances, if I'm looking at page 9, you're saying, okay, the CC1 and 2, the returns are, you know, plus or minus 15, 12, 14, 15%. But then when you look at the R3 and R4, we're now up to 25, 30%. Well, wouldn't that speak to, well, perhaps then we need different code, different goals, different structures, and instead of just doing a one-size-fits-all? I'm asking questions because I think that's what we're here to do, because the objective is to maximize production. And I'm all for a developer making a good return on their capital, but why should we be subsidizing developers? And that's effectively what this is saying. So moving on. So back to the mixed use. So in 2020, which has now been 4.5 years ago, 5.5 years ago, Council had a directive that was very clear about increasing affordable housing in mixed-use projects. And they stated that perhaps the approach to that would be to look at using square footage. Now, I read staff's statement on square footage, and I didn't understand. There seems to be a conflation between how you calculate and what your reporting requirements are. Because as Council's original directive said, we should have 20% of mixed-use housing be affordable, period. But 20% based on square footage, not units. And those of us who've been around for a while know that there's this really confusing calculation around units, because the developer can pick how many units they want, and it's not a fixed formula like there is for residential properties, which is entirely based on the square footage of the lot. So how many units the developer chooses to make out of a mixed-use project is currently, pick a number. if we were to require a minimum of 20% of the total housing to be affordable, and the developer could still pick a number in terms of the number of units they wanted to do, why isn't that possible? Why is that so difficult to actually calculate? If we say it's a 10,000 square foot of residential property and 20% of that is 2,000 square feet, divvy that up into 5 units, 10 units, however you choose to do, in order to look at your compliance with state law and city code, et cetera. Why is that so difficult?
We're trying to maintain consistency, so this question intersects with our zoning improvement program. We're introducing commercial density indicators under the zoning improvement program, so therefore there's more transparency. We also wanted to ensure that when developers apply for a project, whether the floor area changes, the number of units can at least maintain the same. There may be modifications through the process that may change floor area. I think it's a more like flexible metric. So we're choosing units over floor area because one, we're introducing a unit indicator. So for us, that's easier to track. And there is an administrative cost to, I think, doing the calculation between floor area to units.
I'm really confused as to what that is, because it's straight up math. It's, you've got this many square feet times 20%, it's this many square feet of units. Now just choose how many units you want. Now, and now that's what we're going to report to RENA, and that's what we're going to use for our calculation of our bonus. So I'm trying to understand, I mean, especially given that in 2020, and I understand all the caveats, but by any intuitive measure, it would increase actual affordable housing, and that's our goal. So, heck, they're going to make all this money on it anyway, so what's a little additional administrative cost? I mean, I'm just trying to ask these questions because I'm seeing these statements that I just don't understand. So
yeah, so state density bonus law requires the affordability mix to rely on unit count and unit size.
Correct.
Our inclusionary, if we were to move away from unit count and square footage.
I'm not saying move away from unit count. I'm saying how you get to the unit count can be done. You do it now with residential, correct? Right now, you have a lot of 10,000 feet in a residential zone, and you use the formula that's on the zoning. It's 872 square feet per unit. That's how you get your unit count, correct? Why can't we do the same thing in commercial, in mixed use?
Yeah. I mean, we are doing that for commercial under the zoning improvement program.
See, we don't have that in front of us. And so we're being asked to make a decision and to make recommendations based on something we don't have, which hasn't been approved, which literally just had a meeting with the community this afternoon. So I thank you. If that's in there, then great, but we don't have that.
Claire, we're not making a decision at this
No,
point.
but we're being asked for input.
Yeah.
And the,
okay.
and the input's saying,
well, you said decision, so I was confused.
Right, well, I'm making a decision on what I'm going to say.
Okay.
I mean, and so you say in here, and I quote, on page 15, oversized luxury units reducing overall affordability is now being addressed more effectively through the city's ZIP program, but it doesn't say how. And so, I mean, if our goal here is to discuss affordability and getting more units, and we're being told to refer to a thing we've not seen, we're getting into a chicken and egg situation here where you've got a ZIP program that we haven't seen, and we're being asked to discuss, and obviously when this comes forward as actually ordinance, to me, it needs to all come together, because to look at this in a bubble separate from the ZIP would be, I don't think, given that you're saying that ZIP is going to address all this stuff.
So we are doing that on the back end between our consulting teams, between project staff. All the options that were studied under this IHO proposal has been built in or integrated into the performa and feasibility work on the ZIP. So they are
Okay.
speaking to each other. You are correct that they're not coming with each other, but we are making recommendations knowing that we are trying to improve and modernize the underlying zoning.
Because the ZIP is even based on a transportation plan that doesn't exist. So we're really talking about, okay.
I was just going to add, Commissioner, I think we get your point that we should probably add a little bit more information for that, so that's a good recommendation, and we can take that when we
Right.
present it to council. So, yeah, thank you for the recommendation.
And you went on page 16 to, and I quote, that you found that applying a floor area approach would likely increase development cost per unit, but there's no statement as to how. I mean, how a floor area approach is going to increase the cost of development. Either you're building a 6-story building with X many units or you're not. I mean, that's the cost of the building. You're not, you know, your calculation is not going to increase the cost. I don't understand the basis of that statement.
We can address that with the next staff report when we come back, or we will provide more information.
Okay, thank
But
you.
We understand the recommendation.
I mean, it just, calculating something is going to make it more expensive. That's counterintuitive. Okay. And back to you make the statement, determining that tracking affordable floor area rather than units would create an administrative burden, but it doesn't state how. And by the way, a 20% requirement for affordable in a mixed-use project, to my understanding, could and would be a development standard. It wouldn't affect the calculation at all. And in the process of this, are we addressing the mixed-use bonus to begin with? Remembering that we put the mixed-use bonus in place long before the state had any housing element, any housing anything. And so we were way ahead of the curve. And now we've got a mixed-use bonus that we're not really getting anything out of.
Correct.
And you know, what at one time was a hard 20%, we haven't gotten a hard 20% out of any of the construction that's happened. We get 13%, 15%. We're not getting 20%. So I'm trying to understand, and perhaps going forward, if you could clarify what we could have as development standards versus these actual calculations for units. Okay? Related to that, there isn't, to my understanding, any understanding in those mixed-use projects as to what percentage should be residential, period. So technically, you could have a mixed-use project that's 9 stories of commercial and then luxury skyboxes on the top, if you will, and that's considered mixed use.
Yeah, so I would say that's not under the scope of the IHO, but is in the scope of the zoning improvement program. We are looking at a minimum residential threshold or dwelling units per acre for mixed-use projects in commercial zone.
Okay.
We have seen that being a pattern, so we are aware and we are making standards to that point.
Okay, thank you. I think that's the bulk of my comments. I mean, to my reading of your math and your charts, et cetera, I just don't think it's granular enough. And I think if we're going to really revisit this, we should really revisit this and really look at it. How are we actually creating housing And how are we incentivizing housing and incentivizing actual construction as opposed to just, switching around percentages here and there? Really look at what works, what doesn't, and how are we incentivizing things and what aren't we? I think that there's an opportunity to be much more creative in creating housing than this is doing so far. I mean, again, back to, we've got wildly divergent returns on cost for residential versus commercial. Why? What does that mean? What is that going to do for incentivizing construction? And what kind of construction do we want to incentivize? Back to consistency with the general plan. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you so much. Who would like to go next to ask questions, provide feedback, or comments? Commissioner Solomon.
Thank you. A few preliminary questions for staff, and then a few questions for our consultant on the line. But I'm referring to Exhibit A, the study, and page 48, which is kind of a matrix that compares us to other jurisdictions. I can see that it's West Hollywood, Santa Monica, Beverly Hills, Los Angeles County, Pasadena, Berkeley. I can see that we have the highest, tied for the highest, inclusionary set-aside requirement at 20%. Not included is Culver City, which is 0. Am I to understand that this study only studied 20% or 25%, or probably more aptly 20 plus 5%?
Correct. The scope was to look at an equivalent inclusionary rate as of today, so 20%.
Equivalent to what we already have on the books at 20%.
Correct.
Okay. I'm going to jump into, I think, the meat of this to me is in the pro formas, which are difficult to wade through because they're dense, and also because it's a PDF and not in Excel. But if you fast forward a few pages to page 55 is where we start the pro formas. To me, the ones that I looked at the most is rental housing in R3 and rental housing in R4 zones. On page 55, and this is true across all the pro formas that are presented, when we go to development costs on the right-hand side, and we go to the land, the cost of the land, that cost differs across the row. Sometimes the land costs $7.75 million. Sometimes it costs $6.75 million. I guess a question for the consultant, can you explain why we didn't use the same standard cost for the land on this assumption?
Sorry, there's two of us, and we're probably trying to figure out who should answer. Jessica also worked on this pro formas. I don't have the study open in front of me to look at the pro formas, but I think what we're doing there is varying the land cost because we did a pretty deep dive on land costs by each zone. And if you think about what gets built in your R3 and R4 zones, often it's larger units, quite luxury, and as you go to the CC1 and CC2, you can build more units, but each per door, as we call it, land value in the comparable sales declines because the overall total is still quite large for an acre. So I think what you're seeing is our variation reflected from looking at a number of land sales in each of those zones and reflecting back.
I'm talking about, though, within each zone. Like on page 55 of your report, only refers to the R3 zone. That's all we're talking about on page 55. And the land cost varies from $7.75 million in some scenarios to $6.75 in other scenarios. And there are other variables that are changing because one's option A, one's option B, one's option C, one's the baseline. That's really confusing to me as I was reading through this, that we don't have a true to me, it feels like we're changing multiple variables. We're changing option A, option B, option C, but we're also changing the land cost.
I can take an attempt. This is Jessica Hitchcock to answer that question. As we were navigating the different options, options A through E, you'll notice that on the pro formas, depending on how you set the inclusionary, whether you're targeting VLI, low or moderate, the density bonus changes for all of these options. So for example, in option A, the density bonus is a 50% bonus because you don't get the benefits of stacking. Whereas in option D, you get a benefit of stacking with a 70% density bonus. And so what we did for these pro formas was we equalized for land. We assumed everything was a half acre for all of these different options. But what happens is when you get more density out of a parcel, effectively someone should be willing to pay more because you can build more units. So in a case like this, it was easier, it made more sense given the variability of the density bonus across options to equalize for the land per residential unit, which you'll see on page 55 in the R3 zone. We set at 250,000 per unit, which was what we came up with from our land analysis.
Okay, so you're saying in an option A world, the dirt costs this much, but in an option C world, the dirt costs a different amount because that's the market conditions and LoopNet will reflect it accordingly.
Correct. The yield is higher in an option D than an option A, so someone should be willing to pay more for an option D.
Okay. I wonder, since this is just a discussion and we'll have more discussions about this, I wonder if there is an easier way to present that, what you just explained to me. As it just sits on an Excel chart, it's kind of hard to understand that that is what you were doing. As we move on to development costs, one thing that I don't know if this was considered as a development cost in your pro forma, but you know, West Hollywood is a very built-out city. There are no naked, undeveloped parcels. Any R3 parcel or R4 parcel that you want to redevelop is going to have something that already exists there. So I'm wondering if this pro forma in the development cost takes into account the displacement element. I mean, you're going to have a developer, if they want to take a dingbat in an R3 and turn it into something else, they're going to have relocation costs for the current tenants that are there. They're going to have Ellis Act processing costs. They're going to have legal compliance with that. And also, all of that takes time. So the carry is going to, I mean, that's going to take over a year. As I'm reading through this chart on construction costs, site work, hard costs, is that displacement, is the cost of displacement, the cost to the developer, is that reflected at all in the development costs?
I can answer that again. So the specific, there is no specific line item for displacement or relocation costs built into these pro formas. One metric that we did when we were doing outreach with developers to hone in on the numbers to make sure that our assumptions lined up was to look at something called the total development cost per unit. That includes land. And that's effectively the all-in cost to build 1 unit of market rate housing. In the R3 zones on page 55, you'll see that in option D, the all-in cost per unit was about $930,000 per unit. In CC1, which is on page 59 on option D, the all-in cost was $750K. While different developers during our task force meetings would cite different costs that they incurred, generally they agreed that these TDC costs per unit reflected what they actually build at currently.
The logic being that in a CC1, there's not existing residential tenants there, so you don't have this displacement cost, and that's reflected in the 750 versus 930.
One could say that. I think the biggest driver of the differential in costs is that the land cost can also be spread out across more units and also across different uses, including commercial uses. You'll note that the land cost per unit in a CC zone, when you look at it from a per unit basis, is lower than an R. And so it does, you're accurate. This pro forma doesn't factor in a replacement cost or tenant relocation costs, but I think the all-in costs reflect what we've heard from developers as well.
Okay. Arguably the largest assumption in the pro forma, well, I'll jump back up again. Going back up to Appendix C, which is on page 48 of your exhibit, this is where we're comparing West Hollywood to other cities. The very first cell on the chart shows the average rent in West Hollywood at $3,100. Then going to page 55 and looking at the first pro forma for rent in an R3, am I to understand that this whole concept about whether or not this building is feasible is based upon a market rate rental rate of an average of $6,630 per unit?
I am so glad you read the appendices. Yes, so Appendix C, the average rent shown there on Zillow reflects all units that are renting in West Hollywood, not solely new construction. When we do pro formas for new construction, we isolate for new construction projects. And how we do that is we look at projects that have been recently constructed and are currently leasing. We use sources like CoStar that track the current rents for newly constructed projects, and we use those new construction rents for our pro forma. So yes, there is a differential in the rent shown, but the rent shown as the plug in the pro forma reflects current market rate rents for new construction.
I totally understand that there would be a premium. If I'm out there in the marketplace and I'm looking for a place to live, a place to rent, I understand that there would be a premium for new construction. As you came up with this average of $6,630, how far was your look back on points of comparison to existing things in the market? Is it brand new construction? Did you look back 5 years?
Appendix E2 shows the data. It's on page 52. On that page, you'll see 6 different projects that we pulled from. All of these were built in 2001 or later. Typically, when we do these analyses, we try to get new construction in 2024, like as close to possible to when we're doing the study. And so this subset includes projects from 2001. There's one project, one in 2002, or 2 in 2002, or 3 in 2002, and 1 in 2023. So these are, we would say, comparable projects to what would be currently constructed.
I mean, it's a lot of townhouses.
PDF, on Appendix E2, there's the multifamily market rent data, and these projects are mostly, a lot of them are on Santa Monica Boulevard. There's one townhouse project, but of the 6, 5 are stacked flats.
So for the $6,630 average rent that you came up with, you only used data from Appendix E2 to come up with that average, or did you also use data from E3?
E3 are condo sales, I believe. Yes. So we use that.
Those are just for the for sale comparisons?
Exactly.
Okay.
We use that for the for sale performance. So, and just to amplify what Jessica was saying, we did allow this analysis in late 24, so what was being built in 24 would not appear in here because they weren't leasing yet, they hadn't set their rents. So that's why you had buildings that were from 22, for example, in 23.
Okay.
When we're doing this work in 24.
Great, thank you, Janet and Jessica. That's all my questions.
Great. Any questions, comments, or feedback from someone else? Vice Chair Jones.
Yeah, I just have one quick clarifying question. It's in the summary of the staff report on page 2, going into page 3. And again, this is just a point of clarification for me, but I also think it would be helpful for it to be written out. So existing regulations state that projects with 10 or fewer units must provide 1 unit but may choose to pay an in lieu fee. In the proposed updates in the blue column to the right, it notes that projects proposing between 2 to 4 will provide a 15% affordable set aside, and then that projects between 5 to 10 units will provide a must-build 15% affordable set aside and an in lieu fee for any fractional obligation. Does this mean that the developers of these projects can no longer provide 1 unit? Or is the right-hand column just a specification of the conditions of the in lieu fee?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so what I'm asking is, just to distill it down to its essence, for projects with 10 or fewer units, right now it's that they can either provide 1 unit or they can choose to pay an in lieu fee. In this right-hand column, it essentially just gives different thresholds and amounts for in lieu fees. Does this mean that they can only pay an in lieu fee now, or are they still able to provide a unit?
So it depends on what category of small projects we're speaking to. Before, they could choose to build the unit or pay the in lieu fee, the fractional of a light tech unit cost. Under 2 to 4 units right now, they can just pay the in lieu fee for the fraction, whatever that may be, under the light tech unit cost. For 5 to 10, there's a must build requirement for 1 unit. Any fractional obligation thereafter is that fraction based on the light tech unit cost.
Okay, I don't want to go too hard into the weeds here, but I do want to make sure I understand because it's not clear to me from reading this. And I've read it now 7 times and it's still not clear. Okay, so for anything under 10 units, can the developer still choose to just build 1 unit? You're
Correct.
saying
Yeah.
they can.
Yes, but they would have, just depending on whether it's the 2 to 4 to 5 to 10, 5 to 10 still has that fractional obligation thereafter.
Got it. Okay. I think it would be helpful, and this is, again, a detail, if you could say in that right-hand column, projects proposing between 2 to 4 units, I would say can provide 1 unit or provide a 15% affordable set aside for extremely low-income units satisfied by it in lieu. This is to some of the other commissioners' points, just wanting it to be as clear as possible because this is dense and I just want to make sure it's very, very clear.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
Stacy's question reminded me a couple of small project questions that I had. So current paradigm, 0 to 10, you can build or you can pay a fee. The staff report makes several mentions that I think it says most of the time they opt to pay a fee. Can you give an estimate about what percentage of the time under the current paradigm that a fee is paid versus an affordable unit being constructed?
We have this data in the report. I'm trying to remember it, but just Jessica, if you remember it on the top of your head, let me know. Otherwise, I'll have to circle back around, but I know we have that number.
I would imagine it's a pretty high number.
Of those that use state density bonus law, between 5 to 10? You're referring
Just
to?
all small projects in the current paradigm, so 10 or less.
I can speak to that. We do have the data in the report, and I believe 3/4 of the projects up to 10 units were paying the fee. And keep in mind, the current set-aside requirement is 10%.
Okay.
It's on page 13 if you want the reference.
And then one more question for Michelle. I think I know the answer to this, but if you pay a fee, whether it's 10%, 15%, does HCD count that fee payment towards our RENA numbers?
No.
Okay.
No.
Thanks.
Can I follow up, because I did have an in lieu fee question. we haven't addressed our in lieu fee calculations in a very long time, correct?
We annually adjust for.
We annually adjust, but is that just based on CPI?
No, that's based on low income housing tax credit unit.
Okay. So, because I didn't see any discussion as to the, how should we discuss it in terms of the comparability of the in lieu fee versus construction? Because at one point we were in a situation where the in lieu fee was a mere fraction of what the cost of construction was. So where do we stand at this point, and should that be addressed as part of this whole conversation?
Yeah, so Jessica and Janet were actually our advisors for that study. The first one was in 2019, and then guys jump in, but I think it was 21 or 22 that we revised it. So it's tied to the cost to build a low-income housing tax credit, which is published each year. So right now, and it's a fraction thereof. So for a 10-unit building, you pay $950,000, almost $1 million, and then it divides by 10 for each. So if it's 2 units, it's closer to like $200,000. 3 units, closer to 300. Like if we just do $1 million for our mind, because it's pretty close to $1 million, it's a derivative thereof. So we're getting close to the cost to actually construct that 1 unit with our housing trust fund in an affordable housing project, which is what we use our trust fund for.
Okay, so, and back to your little charts with all the costs, which I've not had any time to look at. How do those numbers compare with what you have done as, you know, the supposedly your ROC?
Jessica, do you want to answer that question?
I could try, or Jessica, either way.
Okay.
Yes. So the pro formas, when there is a fractional fee obligation in the pro formas, it reflects the current fee that Allison noted, which is close to $1 million per unit. And so, you know, we folded that cost into our pro formas.
That wasn't my question. My question was, how does that in lieu fee, as calculated per the formula, compare to your math as to what you are saying the cost of construction is?
I think what you're trying to say is, do you lose money on the affordable units in the project, and how much loss are you taking compared to that fee? Is that the question?
My question, to put it very crassly, is if I'm a developer and I sit down and do the math, what is it going to cost me to build that unit versus write a check? And is that comparable in your chart?
See, but it's not just the cost, then they get rent for it, so there's some value even in the affordable unit. So that's why we're having trouble answering the question.
I'm sorry, you're blurry again. There's some value what?
There's some value. So an affordable unit is just lower rent, take a rental project, than the market rates. They do get some rent on those units.
Yes.
And that's part of the whole calculus in the pro forma. So it's really, I think about the loss. Some people frame it as a loss of the foregone rent that's market rent, the difference between the affordable limit and the market rate rent, and they frame that as a loss. And that's what I thought you were asking on those units.
No, I'm sorry. You're really hard to understand. I mean, I do this for a living. So you're going to sit down and you're going to say, okay, if I build this affordable unit and it's going to cost me this much, and I'm going to, you know, on average, this is my income that I'm going to make, and I'm going to assume it's 100% rented because it's an affordable unit, and the city's going to have their list, and, you know, I'll have a person in there. And so therefore, I will have this much income, and therefore, my net number is $1 million. And the in lieu fee is $900,000. Well, then I now ask myself a question. Hey, I'll save $100,000 by writing a check for the in lieu fee as opposed to building the unit. I'm trying to understand if that conversation happened anywhere in this analysis that said, oh, based upon the city's current in lieu fee calculation, and what we're saying is these pro formas, there is an absolute connect, or is there a disconnect? Are they in alignment or are they not?
I mean, I'm trying to think of the best way to answer that, but so if you build a unit for $1 million, but you get rent that capitalizes, I'm gonna use real estate language now, to only 500,000, your loss is 500,000 compared to the market rate. So that affordable inclusionary unit costs you 500,000 versus writing a check.
Correct.
So you're much likelier to build the unit if you can fit it and if you want to do that. Some people don't want to do that, and again, the small projects right now, it's only a 10% obligation. The large are 20, and your IHO gives them no choice, they have to build. But most developers, all the developers do on the large projects, and then take the 70% density bonus. That's what all your projects have looked like in the last few years, or 50. So I hope that answers some of it.
No.
Well, think of it the other way. If you have a 10% obligation, you pay $950K and you write a check. But on the larger units, you have a 20%. So if you're writing a check there, which you aren't allowed to do right now, right? You would write a $2 million check.
The conversation only pertains to the places where you can do the yield new fee. There's no point in having that conversation on units, on buildings of 50 units.
You can't right now, you can't do the yield new fee except on the small projects.
Correct.
So
my question was simply, based upon your pro formas, the net cost, based upon your pro formas, if I'm a developer and I use your pro formas, what will it cost me to build that inclusionary unit net of the rental income? So what is my net number versus writing the check? That's all I want to know.
It's cheaper to build the unit.
It's what?
Cheaper to build the unit, generally.
Okay. That was my question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi,
Great.
Chair. I'm sorry. Point of
Commissioner
clarification. Yes. Just for my clarification, since we're not voting on this item, is this our opportunity to both ask questions and provide policy recommendations to staff? Okay, all in one. Got it. Okay, and then you were going to say something, so. Oh, okay. Chair Gregoire, were you going to say something?
No.
All right, cool.
Feel free to
Great.
continue.
I have a few comments. I think I've organized them such that I can just deliver them all in one. I think to open it up, I think, I applaud the city of West Hollywood for having a really bold and honestly ahead of its time inclusionary housing ordinance. Ultimately, an in lieu fee is taxing something that we want in order to get more of that thing, right? Like in general, one of the very popular tax schemes politically is to tax things like cigarettes and alcohol in order to fund things like parks and education, right? We tax something we want less of in order to get something that we want more of a collective good. And I understand the logic of having an inclusionary housing ordinance and of having an in lieu fee. But I do think that the in lieu fee specifically is something that I struggle with because we want housing. I think that part of what brings us to this paradigm, and I know this is like 100,000 feet up, but I promise I'm going to zoom in. Part of what brings us to this paradigm is that we have like sort of this federal government that does not build public housing. And so the way that we got here is that the government used to build public housing, and I promise you I won't regale you with the whole story, but we've come to a place where our federal government and in general our local governments don't themselves build public housing that is meant to be affordable. And what we do instead is we try to encourage the private market to provide those units. And it's not a clean process, right? It's a little bit clunky because you're trying to get something that is a public good that we're saying that we all need, that is, I think most people can agree that we consider a human right, but get the private market to provide it sort of against all odds. And so that sort of, in general, sets the stage, I think, for how I think of policies like this in general, I think covenanted affordable units are really nice. They are a good stopgap because we don't have public housing. We don't have publicly funded, publicly provided housing. But ultimately, they don't bring down the cost of market rate housing. That the bowl that most of us swim in, it doesn't actually bring down that cost. And in terms of in individual developments that are providing affordable units, and speaking from my professional experience, it pushes up the cost of the market rate housing generally, because you need that to support the affordable housing the covenanted affordable housing. Another distinction that I want to make that I think is really important is distinguishing between covenanted affordable units, which I call capital A affordable units, and NOAA, naturally occurring affordable housing, right? And so what we're, obviously when we're talking about an inclusionary housing ordinance, we're talking about capital A covenanted affordable units, which of course, again, they're not naturally occurring affordable housing, which is what we really need more of. I mean, when we look at the chart, the RENA chart, and we see this, across the different cities and across council districts, we see that the greatest need is almost always concentrated in market rate housing, because we understand that market rate housing becomes naturally occurring affordable housing, and that's the aquarium that most of us are swimming in. Of course, covenanted units you have to qualify for, so they kind of swim around in their own, you can't really call it a market, but they kind of swim around in their own bowl, right? They're not really, I just want to make that abundantly clear, because obviously I support affordable housing, but I think the mechanism by which we get there is really important. And I think conflating capital A affordable housing with naturally occurring affordable housing runs into a lot of misunderstandings about what the policy mechanisms should be in order to produce housing that people can afford. So that said, I think, so in terms of this policy that we're considering, and I'm looking at the chart as it pertains to the rental units, I'm a little torn between option C and D. I think what I like obviously about option D is that it does require 5% of those lower income units to be ELI, extremely low income, which is obviously an underserved market. Because the RENA didn't require reporting of ELI units, we don't really have a sense of how underserved that market is. But I think the other thing that's really important for me here is the way that the city of West Hollywood, my understanding, allocates its affordable units is that it has people on a wait list, right? And those people are at least generally categorized, if not directly, then indirectly by their incomes as either VLI, or I'm sorry, very low income, or moderate income, right? That's how they qualify for an affordable unit, is that they qualify for one of those affordability types. And I think what I find a little bit difficult about the difference between option C and D is that what we've basically done is taken the total 15% that's allocated to very low income units, and in option D broken it up into 10% very low and 5% extremely low. But everyone who qualifies for a very low, everyone who qualifies, like the extremely low income is kind of baked into the very low income right now. That category is all one category. And so if it's up to the city to decide if someone on a wait list gets the unit, then if they're extremely low income, they're gonna qualify for that very low income unit anyway. So is the point of breaking out the extremely low income in option D in order to meet that future RENA criteria that will include extremely low income units, and so we want to have more covenants so that we can say, hey, we're meeting that need?
And that's a two-pronged answer. So yes, we want to receive credit for those extremely low income units. But secondly, because of the function of moving from Schedule A to the state HCD schedules, most of the units that were being produced was extremely low and very low. So we still want to produce extremely low at a rate, not necessarily that same rate, but we want to preserve a pool of units for ELI.
And I guess, thank you for your response. I guess as a follow-up question to that, if someone on the waiting list is extremely low income and a very low income unit becomes available, so I'm just assuming, maybe I'm oversimplifying the process, but it's their turn to be matched. That person could get matched with a very low income unit, or no? They would need a unit covenanted for extremely low income households.
Hi, Allison Bartle again. There's a ceiling and a floor
There's a-
for every
there's a floor
category.
for the
Yeah, there's a
income.
ceiling and a floor because
Yeah.
we don't want someone to be rent burdened.
Right.
So if they went into the VLI unit, while their income may qualify, the rental rate would be too high for it to be affordable to their income bracket. So there's there's a ceiling, in which case we would want the ELI units to be in the ELI units so as to pay the rent tied to an ELI unit. Now, we can talk to it, and certainly some folks are more comfortable being 50% rent and burden, 60, but in an ideal situation, we know that our list has a lot of folks in that 30% category, and we want to put somebody, in it. We also have a lot of folks in the VLI. So we don't have concern about leasing either of those categories with our existing list, and then we also periodically refresh that list, and so if we change the policy, we would also be advertising a list that had a wider income bracket and being, made available at the new incomes and rental schedules that would be created through this policy.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm actually really glad we're not making a decision tonight because I don't know what decision I would make. I think my next comment is that this is an important distinction, obviously, because the state density bonus law doesn't have a provision for extremely low. It's all lumped into very low. And I know earlier, we were speaking to the seemingly high returns in the pro formas. I look at pro formas a lot. It's really hard to make the kind of returns that showed on these pro formas, and I think that's probably because it's very back on napkin. If you've ever planned a big vacation, maybe you and like 25 family members, you try to get every cost down, and you say, oh great, this is only gonna cost us $5,000. Once you do the vacation, you realize that it actually costed you like $8,500, and you're like, where did all these costs come from? Well, it was slow, you missed the first train, you had to catch the next one, which means you had to get a hotel in one city overnight that you didn't plan on getting, and things happen, and construction and planning and land use are messy, messy business. And so I think this is an important question as it relates to density bonus, because if we're gonna have those extremely low income units, it is going to create a burden. It's essentially a tax on development, and while I wanna see affordable units, if we throw too much, if we gum up the works too much, and we see less development, and we all know that costs are going up. They're going up for all of us individually, and they're also going up for people trying to build multi-million-dollar land use projects. And so I hesitate to mandate the 5% ELI inclusion at the ELI level specifically, and I know that's staff recommendation, which is why I'm considering it more heavily. If there's not a density bonus structure, I know that as part of the LI allocation, that 5% LI allocation that's baked into that the city, kind of proposes its own density bonus structure whereby they would get a 20% bonus similar to what they would get at the state level if the state included stacking at the low income level. I don't see anything similar for ELI. I think it's probably like most years a very small distinction. I think a couple years ago on this, the difference between VLI and LI wasn't very much, and it could be that happens some years with ELI and VLI too, like maybe it's not a big deal. I just think that as we move into a very, very uncertain future, it's hard to justify squeezing that out because I wish the state had a density bonus that acknowledged extremely low income. And that said, I find option C to be most alluring. I do like the option of the in lieu fee, at least to cover 5% so that it becomes a mandatory 15% affordable, and then there's a 5% optional in lieu fee. Again, I just think that we're moving into a really uncertain future, and I think that having that 20% right off that bat, especially for those projects that have a base density of exactly 5 units. I know that what we're doing with this update, part of it is separating out small projects that are 2 to 4 units and some that are 5 to 10. But if the base density is 5 and you get a 70% bonus, that only gets you to 9 units. So it's not really a larger, it's still quite a small project. There's not a lot of meat on that bone, I think. But if you do a smaller mandatory and then possibly an in lieu fee, especially if there's a structure that allows that fee. I don't know how the city structures that fee and if it has to all be paid at one time or if there's a way to pay it off as the project pays dividends, that seems like the smartest way to me because everybody gets their money and it doesn't really slow things down. I don't know how easy it is to include that in like a construction loan or something. That's probably coming out of pocket, that fee. So anyway, those are my thoughts. I think to me, option C seems the most attractive, only, and I blame the state. They don't acknowledge the extremely low income level, and that makes it really hard to try to require of someone if they're, of course they are gonna get a bonus, but it's a different rent level, and that's really hard to justify. And then I think the one other comment I had is this requirement for, I know for the affordable units, they are supposed to be similar, and this is, I don't think is something that's changing with this policy, but I noticed it while reading the staff report about the affordable units needing to be of comparable size, finish, and quality, which I think is good, or being one bedrooms that are at least 650 square feet. That part, I think that, I'm wondering where that 600, and builder's grade, yeah, I'm wondering where that 650 square feet came from for one bedrooms.
That has been in our code for a while, and I'm not exactly sure where it came from.
Okay, I would want the city to consider re-looking at that. I think as we increase the base density in the R2 and R3 zones, which is one of the things that's currently on the table, that if those take a bonus, we would expect it to produce denser, smaller units, which is good, because that feeds that naturally occurring affordable housing I was talking about earlier, right? If we can build smaller units, then no matter what happens to covenants or anything in the future, someone is going to be motivated to pay less for that unit than like a 1,500 square foot penthouse with floor to ceiling windows, for instance, just for comparison purposes, right? So I think we should want smaller units, and having that 650 square foot minimum for a one bedroom that's affordable also pushes up the minimum for their market rate units, right? Because now that's what they're competing with within that building. It's like, well, if I'm gonna have a 650 square foot very low income affordable unit, then my market rates have to beat that. So yeah, I think that's just a point of comment for me.
That's a great comment. We are addressing that through the zoning improvement program. We're trying to incentivize smaller units. So something that we did consider was adding another local density bonus to units that have a max threshold. That way it's a revision of our requirement to R3 and R4 zones, which require an average max unit size. But of course, we don't want to make that a requirement. We want to incentivize that instead. Yep. So we are looking at that through that process. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm sorry. And then I did have one more thing. It's in the same vein. I think, so there's a clause of the Exhibit A and of the staff report that talks about like housing types for specialized population, like students, senior housing, shared housing, foster youth, transitional age youth. I'm going to speak specifically to the student housing and the shared housing. In fact, scratch the student. Well, the student housing, one consideration is that if you're going to require affordable units in student housing, that gets a little difficult because you have to actually measure the income of the parents, not really the student. Like most students on paper are going to look pretty broke, but like, you know, he drives a Bentley on the weekends or something. Like I don't know. I feel like qualifying people for affordable student housing is always very clunky and difficult to actually do. The shared housing, separately, shared housing is meant to be, again, naturally occurring affordable housing in a healthy housing market, which I'm hoping that we're moving toward, where we have enough units for everyone, more than enough units for everyone. You don't really have to require shared housing to be affordable, like covenanted affordable, because it's naturally occurring affordable, because you would clearly pay less for that than you would for like your own apartment with your own bathroom, kitchen, whatever. So I'm a little torn about mandating this capital A affordable housing from something that's meant to be naturally occurring affordable housing. Again, it feels like a stopgap when what we really want is to encourage the shared housing type by like tearing down all the barriers to building something like that, so that hopefully once we get to the world where we have enough units for everyone, this is a naturally occurring affordable type. I think, again, if we throw too much gum in the works of something that's already meant to be naturally occurring affordable housing, we ultimately do discourage
that typology and encourage typologies that can support a flat rate of affordable housing across all projects, and that is going to push up the market rate, which is going to discourage shared housing because it's hard to make your money back in something like that. I think that's everything I had. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Vice Chair Jones.
Yeah, I have a quick question to clarify something. It's actually comes up from one of the pieces of correspondence that we received. It's just something that someone asked us to clarify at the hearing. The staff report timing trigger is stated as permitting, which seems to imply issuance of building permits, not approval of entitlements. Does it refer to the actual issuance of building permits?
No, so the effectiveness of this IHO update would be for projects that are not yet deemed complete or are in the entitlement process. So that is incorrect. It's not applying to building and safety permits.
Great, okay, so I just wanted to read that into the record. Thank you. I really appreciate Commissioner Harris's comments, mostly because something that I grappled with, and I'm sure this is kind of the $950,000 question, so to speak, is we can sit here all night and talk about what the distribution should be. But if things don't get built, then it doesn't really matter. And it's one of the reasons why I am glad that we heard so much from the development community. And, totally am in agreement with, Commissioner Hoopengarner's comments that we're not here to line their pockets, but I do want there to be incentives for them to build, because ultimately they are the ones who will be building, and things do need to pencil. We do live in a capitalist society. We think people need to make money. That's why we're here. It's okay. But to that end, the reason I'm making that comment, beyond my just kind of straight up anxiety about it, because it's just mucky and hard to kind of see into the crystal ball of what's going to happen. But to that end, I do appreciate your comments about option C and option E versus option D that do include that 5% moderate income. At the end of the day, I think it's just going to be about weighing what's most likely to get things built. Because again, a lot of this is, I don't want to say pie in the sky because it makes it seem not worth doing. It absolutely is. But this is just something that I really struggled with in reviewing these materials and trying to think about, we could say any numbers we want. It doesn't mean it's going to get built. It's already not being built, So I struggle with that a little bit. Those are my comments. I don't know how helpful they are, but I wanted to put that out there. But there was a lot of head nodding from me around options C and E, which are the only two that include any moderate income units. So thank you.
Commissioner Hoopengarner.
I think what would help going forward is, and I think part of the confusion, and thank you, Commissioner Harris, for sort of discussing the C and D issues, is that we've got two different drivers. We've got the state density bonus law, which has percentages and categories, et cetera, and we have RENA. And they're not in alignment. And so we're being asked to create code that addresses both of them. And so I think moving forward, what would be really helpful is back to, I think, my earlier comment about more granularity, is really breaking this down in a way that reflects reality and what's going to get built, what's going to really help build affordable housing, and importantly, actual market rate, because I think we all know we've got tons of luxury housing in this city, okay? And we've got a lot of housing that's being rented on Airbnb and not actually being, true middle income housing, which is what we truly, really need, okay? So as we're looking at this, how are we really looking at it in terms of the community and what kind of housing we're providing and who we're providing it for? And then showing where, okay, but we're cobbling this together for RENA and we're cobbling this together for state density laws, so that when we look at these charts and when we look at this analysis, we're understanding it all. Because I think, you know, you've got this whole, under option D, you know, the density bonus is 70%, which is 50% SDB plus 20% LDB. That gets really confusing. You want to talk about math problems. Now we're really into some fun ones. So I think really breaking that down better would be extremely helpful for me in terms of understanding how does that really work. And, you know, back to, you know, my world in construction is when you write a contract, how does that actually calculate? Show a real world example, and show a real world example in an R3, and show a real world example in a mixed use environment. And say it's, okay, let's assume each one is 10,000 square feet and, you know, it's this type of construction, and show what it works out to be. And then really look at the drivers and what pushes it one way or another. What's going to generate more affordable housing? What's going to generate more middle rate housing? And really look at that, how we're making the mix that's going to incentivize the actual construction. So that's back to my original comment about granularity and really thinking through the implications of these things. Thank you.
Commissioner Edwards.
Yeah, just to dovetail on what was just said, is what I'm really curious about is that, do you have access to like the Turner Housing Policy Simulator? Because it seems like it would I think it would be helpful that to the real world examples, if you plug in these numbers and start playing with those numbers and see, you know, how do your hypotheses work out? And then, if it's possible, to turn that into a narrative to help sometimes with the understanding. Because, I mean, when I looked at everything, I was like, oh my goodness, there's a lot of detail, and it's kind of hard to understand how this all plays out. So I really appreciate everybody's insights and comments, because it helped illuminate what the challenges are. Because, like, I know that when, you know, as a person who's advocating for housing, and you would have a client and they would say, okay, this is what we want to achieve, and then you take a look at the land use code, you know, this goes downhill from there. And so if you know, the complexity of trying to combine everything, if there's any way that you can start playing with these scenarios, we can move the levers up and down to see what it looks like, it would be greatly appreciated.
Great. Commissioner Solomon.
I have final comments to give, but you two haven't spoken yet, so I can go now, or?
Go ahead.
Okay. You know, I am glad that this is just a discussion item. I am really uncomfortable with moving anything forward to council as a recommendation that uses an assumption of $6,630 as an average monthly rent for the market rate units. Commissioner Harris had a great 10,000-foot view of this with lowercase a affordable housing and uppercase A affordable housing. And I understand that because of this paradigm that HCD is set up, it is your goal to deliver uppercase A affordable housing. HCD breaks it out on that we need so much of LI, so much of VLI, so much of MI. What I care about the most is what percentage of our people are rent burdened. And HCD and HUD use the calculation of 30%. If you're paying more than 30% of your monthly income towards your rent, you're paying too much. That's the rule of thumb used by both of them. At $6,630 a month, that equates to an average annual salary of $265,000. You need to make at least $265,000 to not be rent burdened based upon this model that we're looking at right here. Part of the problem is it because of the required 20% set aside. Commissioner Harris says uppercase A, lowercase a. In my mind, I just say subsidized housing. that is what it is. The rest of the market is bearing the cost of these subsidized uppercase A affordable units. The common complaint that the general public would give about any new housing construction is they're only going to build luxury units. Well, according to this model, that's the only thing that pencils because of the cost to carry our required set aside for inclusionary units. I don't know if there is time to do this before this goes to council, but as we take a broader look in relation to ZIP, as we do raise the ceiling, I would want to look at studies that are more than just 20% only or 25% only. I would want to look at studies that include funded inclusionary units. I mean, it is a social good. There is a benefit to having uppercase A affordable units as it relates to our workforce housing, as it relates to our climate goals. It's a social good that we should pay for if we value it as a city. But trying to force it on the market based upon these goals, this is a large 10,000-foot view of the whole thing, but I doesn't probably surprise you that I am opposed to the idea of inclusionary zoning, but this is what happens when you have inclusionary zoning. You have an average market rate rent of $6,630, and that means that a lot of projects don't get built, and those that do only deliver luxury units. So I hope that we can have a broader discussion that looks at different thresholds of inclusionary requirements. I look forward to being a part of that discussion. That's all I'll say for the night. Thanks.
Great. Anybody else? This has been a really great discussion. I really appreciate what everyone had to say here today. You know, I'm generally happy with the direction this is going in and with option D, but this has been personally very challenging to me because I was a rent stabilization commissioner for almost 17 years. I'm committed to affordable housing, building affordable housing. I've always been a supporter of the inclusionary housing ordinance. I think there's a place for inclusionary housing, but it's really interesting. There really is a lot of discussion in California, in Los Angeles now, about should we be prioritizing just simply building housing, building market rate housing, and have naturally occurring affordable units as more housing is built. I can't say that I'm in favor of getting rid of inclusionary housing. I still think there's a place for it. If the government's not going to build affordable housing, we have to get it built somehow because there's such an incredible need. So, but we have to get the mix of what's required. 15% set-asides, 20% set-asides, with or without in lieu fees. We have to get the mix right because we don't want it to be so onerous that less housing is built. The priority really needs to be that we need to build housing in California, and we have to be careful that our inclusionary housing ordinance doesn't inadvertently discourage that. So, generally, I'm in favor of this being presented at this point to City Council. I think everybody had a lot of great thoughts that I hope somehow staff can synthesize and present to the City Council. But it probably would be good to sort of queue up in their minds a discussion of, how aggressively do we want to require in lieu fees or even require the construction of on-site units. Because again, ultimately, we want to contribute to the increase of housing in California. But we have to find the right balance, and that's the tricky part. And everyone's going to have a different opinion about where the line should be drawn. So thank you for bringing this item to us today, and we understand this is just the beginning, and once you receive guidance from City Council, I understand something will be coming back to us for further consideration.
Chair, over here, sorry. Before you close this item, we would just like to read into the record that we did receive correspondence after the deadline. You were provided hard copies of that email, and the public was presented that here in council chambers also, and it would be put into the permanent file.
Great, thank you so much. Do any commissioners have anything else to add? Is staff happy with what have we given you what you need for tonight?
We have a lot to process and integrate. Thank you.
Well, great. Okay, well, Commissioner Edwards.
Oh, I just want to say y'all did a heck of a job. This is a lot that you had to process and present, and I know there's still more work to do, but we appreciate y'all.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for staff for all your hard work on all of this. Okay, we'll move on with our agenda. We don't have any unfinished business or excluded consent items. Item 15, items from staff, planning manager's update and subcommittee management.
Hello, Chair, Vice Chair, and Planning Commission. Yeah, just a little bit of the updates for your upcoming agendas. So there's quite a bit in the queue. So for November 6th meeting, we do have 3 items on the agenda. There is a billboard project at 9200 Sunset Boulevard. There is also a general plan consistency item for Hart Park and the improvements that are happening there. And then there will be a discussion, a request for a representative to attend the 2026 Sacramento Legislative Action Day for appointed officials. So I think that happened back in 2024, and the city wants to do it again and invite a planning commissioner as well as designated delegate for that conference or day in Sacramento. November 20th, we do have a long list of items, and we will try and streamline that for you as much as possible. But currently on the agenda, we have a ZTA regarding streamlining qualifying housing projects, which is one of the council directives that LRP recently received. There's also a request for extended operations in an outdoor area at Ore Bar down on Santa Monica Boulevard. We discussed the ZTA state parking bill implementation. That's also on the agenda for the 20th, as well as a project at 8600 Melrose, and a project regarding, well, actually a discussion about your meeting calendar for 2026. So I think a lot of these items are bunching up because we have a couple of cancellations that are coming up.
I caught the pun. It was a good pun.
Fantastic. December 6th, we have, December 4th, we have 2 items. One item is an extension for a project at 1040 North La Brea, as well as a public hearing for a 6-story multifamily residential building at 948 North Hayward. And the December 18th Planning Commission meeting is canceled. For Long Range Planning Subcommittee, we don't have any items on the agenda for November 20th. We may probably cancel that meeting. And, oh, yes, we do.
Sorry, we will on the November 20th meeting have an update for the subcommittee, bring the ZTA for billboards off of Sunset.
There we go, but no meeting on December 18th. And then for Design Review Subcommittee, there is 2 items on the October 23rd agenda. That's the creative sign at 8600 Melrose Avenue, as well as that 6-story multifamily building that I just mentioned at 948 North Hayward. November 13th, there is a review of a project at 7811 Santa Monica Boulevard. No meeting on November 27th due to the Thanksgiving holiday, and nothing currently scheduled in December. So with that, available for any questions if you may have.
Great. Vice Chair Jones?
Yeah, I just want to note, this was an oversight on my part. I will not be able to attend the Design Review Subcommittee meeting next Thursday. I have a procedure I have to have done, and I'm down for the count for the day. So I will not be there that day. My apologies to staff and my fellow commissioners. Everybody thought I was scheduling something on a day that I was free, and I'm definitely not. So I'm sorry about that. I will not be there.
Any other questions? Great, thank you so much. Public comment. Mr. Gillig, do we have any additional public comment?
Chair, we do. We have one public comment here in Council Chambers. Anita Goswami, you'll have 3 minutes.
Hi there, I'm Anita Goswami. I'm a longtime resident of West Hollywood. First, we need more affordable housing. No question whatsoever on that. There are so many people that I know that are struggling with work, they're struggling, and we need to do that. I want to just set that out front, that is really important. I'm really glad that it was brought up of the formula. I believe it was Commissioner Solomon who said that 30% is what we should be spending on rent, and the reality is it's a hell of a lot more than that. And that is something I'm really glad that the city is working to do something about that. That's an important thing. One comment, at an earlier meeting, you were talking a lot about specific zoning for very small units. And I know within that context, you were speaking of it for specialized zoning units. I mean, this is like senior housing or student housing, things like that. I am curious, how would that kind of housing, those kinds of units fall into this discussion of affordable housing when you're measuring it based on units or measuring it based on square footage? I think that there's some options to consider there, so that's just, not just within this, but just in general, to think about that. And what I'm doing is I am coming up to a bigger context. None of these things, what's presented here is a very specific item. And most of these items that I see that are presented to the commissions are small items. That context around it is not there. And I think that is just something really important to keep is, okay, we're doing this thing with the left hand, what's the right hand doing? Are we pulling that to, let's make sure we have that clear and look, maybe the left hand and the right hand can benefit each other. The next comment that in general, I think we need to have more transparency when staff is coming with different topics and bringing them here for input, that's awesome. But then taking it to the council for policy, and the council then makes that policy decision, and then it's kicked back down here to figure out how to implement it. I think that is wrong. I think those details need to be figured out here at this level, because this is the group that understands it. This is where the experts are. This is where you're getting that community input. You are part of the community. You are the experts. This is how it can come together, and that's where it should be. The last thing here is when we talked about ZIP. Planning staff have repeatedly said that ZIP, no decisions have been made on ZIP, and yet the study that was presented today, that foundation is ZIP. So what is it? So thank you.
And Chair, that is our last public speaker for general public comments.
Great, thank you for the public comments. Any comments from commissioners?
I'll beat you to it. Welcome back, Commissioner Edwards. Thanks, glad to have you back.
Commissioner Hoopengarner.
Yes, I'd like to invite everyone to a movie. October 30th, the city is sponsoring the screening of a movie called Below the Belt. And it's a movie that was executive produced by Hillary Clinton and Rosario Dawson and Mae Whitman and others. And it is extremely important, and it's an actually excellent movie about a disease that affects 10% of all women worldwide. You know someone who has endometriosis, and it affects a lot of women and other people with uteri. So I encourage you to sign up. You can go to the city calendar at weho.org/calendar and register and come. There'll be a reception. And it's actually it's a documentary, but it's a very, very good movie. So I hope to see you there.
I missed the last meeting, so I didn't get to say farewell to Commissioner Lombardi. I texted him on the side, but just to put it out there in public, I really enjoyed serving with him. He taught me the most about organization and how to approach these meetings, and also the soft design eye that he had and the lens in which he looked through projects. I learned a lot from him. I'm glad I got to serve with him. Welcome back, Mark. It's good to have you back up here. And go Dodgers.
Commissioner Cavallero?
Welcome back, Commissioner Edwards. I look forward to working with you again. And I also want to do an invite. On November 16th, if you haven't heard, our AIDS Monument is opening. The reception's at 4 o'clock. It's going to be at the PDC on the courtyard right across from us. It'll be about 2 hours, and then there's a big party at the Abbey. I've been working on this project for 12 years, and it's so amazing that it's finally opening up, and I hope everybody comes.
What's the time on that?
4 o'clock, from 4 to 5:30.
On November 16th.
On the 16th, yeah.
Vice Chair Jones?
I just want to say welcome back, Mark. Very happy you're here.
Anything else?
It's good to be back. We started off strong.
Well, welcome back, Commissioner Edwards. We're looking forward to working with you again. Okay, anything else? Great, hearing none, I will adjourn this meeting to the next regularly scheduled of the Planning Commission, which is scheduled to be held on Thursday, November 6th, 2025, here in Council Chambers, starting at 6:30 p.m. Have a good night, everybody.